So I had this mindset that everybody in prison was evil. There was bad people. And little did I know, by going there, despite the appearance of these guys was caring. These guys was loving. And these guys didn't perceive me as a threat at all because I was this little kid in adult prison.
I'm Julia Paskin for LAist. My guest today is Gary Tyler, a textile artist living and working in Los Angeles for the past decade. He'd spent more than 40 years in prison after being wrongfully convicted of murder by an all-white jury in 1974 in Louisiana when he was just 17 years old. In prison, Gary learned how to quilt. His work builds upon a long history of story quilting, literally weaving his life experiences in incarceration with a high level of skill and artistry. His newest exhibition, Illuminations from a Captured Soul, is now at the official Welcome Gallery in Los Angeles. And he joins us now. Gary Tyler, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for welcoming me, Julia.
So we are LAist. We like to talk a lot about what it's like to live and work and navigate life here.
Okay.
So we're wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the impact of this area on you as a young person. I understand that you spent time in Los Angeles when you were a teenager or an adolescent,
Yes,
is that right?
Right.
And tell us about that time and the kinds of people that you met.
Well, back in 1970, I moved out here with my sister who'd been out here since '65. And I came out here. And of course, my first time ever being out of the state of Louisiana. And I found it to be quite amazing, different from the place that I came from in the South. And it was like a new world I was venturing into. And I learned things that I never thought was accessible or available, so far as education-wise. And also the environment itself, because it was totally different from the way the culture in the South was. So it was more open and engaging. So that was so, to me, it was so, captivating at the time.
Were there any personalities, when you said education, any kind of, any people that you remember meeting at the time that left an impact?
Well, during the time, it was in the 70s. It was really active during the heyday, I guess, of the civil rights movement. And also you had different struggles in the community that I lived in South Central. You had different activities, cultural activities, of course. I remember going to Will Rogers Park, which now named Martin Luther King Park. And they used to have Watch Summer Festival. And also they used to have different parades where the first time, I, as a kid, grew up during the time of the Jackson 5. So I had opportunity to watch them participate in the parade, Sammy Davis Jr. and stuff like that. So that kind of really impacted my life back then.
You mentioned the civil rights movement. It was quite a time for the Black Power movement and the Black Panthers in LA.
Yes.
Did you get to experience that?
Well, as a young kid, I also walked around the community, knocked on doors, and got petitions signed for Angela Davis.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Can you say more about that?
Well, in the community where I was at, as I said, it was more engaging. And during that time with the struggle to free Angela Davis, of course, I didn't know who Angela Davis was. And I was trying to make that connection. But I remember in August, the incident that happened at the LA County Jail. So I remember that incident there, but I learned more about it later on in life. Nonetheless, the community that I lived in, it was quite active and engaging. So as young kids, we were encouraged to go around, knock on the door, and encourage people to sign a petition to free Angela Davis.
Wow. And how old were you then?
I was I was 12. Yes, 12 in 1990. Excuse me, 1970.
Knocking on doors in the South Central neighborhood.
In South Central, you're right.
To free Angela Davis.
Yeah, to free Angela Davis.
Wow. You mentioned that the culture here being different from what you experienced in the South. What was that? What were those differences?
Well, if anyone knows the South, it's probably arcane. It's really, you could say it's different. It's like walking out of the dark into the light, coming to LA.
Mm.
And I learned things that I never thought existed. Like I learned about Negro History Week. In Louisiana, the South didn't teach you anything about Negro History Week.
Mm.
And this is something that's been in existence since Carter G. Wilson when he established the week itself, and later became, African American month in February. It was just only celebrated for a week back then. So that was one thing, and knowing that there was noted black historians that made a difference. In the South, we wasn't taught anything like that.
Wow.
You know.
How long did you spend here?
Well, all the way until '72, and I went back to Louisiana.
Why did you leave?
Well, as a teenager, when you come of age, you think you know everything, and no one can tell you anything. So
Right.
it was one of those things where I didn't know the neighborhood that I was in, and the guys that I was hanging with, and it's just one of those things where it's caused conflict with my family here in LA, and to the point where I wouldn't listen. So it got to, so my sister made a decision that she gonna send me back to Louisiana.
Yeah.
So I went back to Louisiana.
Would you say that your experience here is connected to your political awakening? Because I mean, you're a very knowledgeable man, and you can speak on a lot of different topics today. Was there a seed planted back then?
Well, when I went back, I wasn't that same young person who had left
Mm.
because of the enlightenment and education that I received when I was out here in LA, and I brought some of those noted things back with me in reference to Black Power sign, dress, and the way I articulated my position about things, and also how I referred to law enforcement. Back then we called them police, but when I came to LA, they used this term as pigs, fuzz, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember when the police passed by, I was with my cousins, and I said, "There'll go a pig there." And they were like looking around and said, "Wait, I don't see no pig."
They were looking for an animal.
They were looking for an animal. That was the first time they ever heard that people refer to police officers as pigs.
Wow. But you don't use that kind of language
Oh,
now.
of course not.
Yeah. You seem to be very based in humanizing people at
Well,
every opportunity.
basically, I try to, respect people regardless of what it is, and hope that I get respect back in return.
So you've talked a lot about your experience. You have a book out now,
Yes.
in your own words, where you're, because people have told your story, but it's an opportunity for you to tell your story in your own words.
Yes.
So you go back to Louisiana after Los Angeles, and in 1974, you're one of a group of black students being bused into a white neighborhood to a high school during a court-ordered desegregation. And this is about 20 years after Brown versus the Board of Education. And the bus is attacked by a white mob. A white boy is killed, a 13-year-old boy is killed. You were wrongfully convicted of this murder. There was a lot of things wrong about the way the case was prosecuted, but I think it's worth saying for our audience that there were multiple witnesses who later recanted, talked about being pressured by police. And despite all this, at 17, you'd become the youngest person at the time in the country on death row. And you're in Angola State Prison. It's a notorious prison, perhaps the roughest in the country.
Yes.
But you also speak so much about how the men there took you under their wing and cared for you, and you represent caring in so many different ways. Those two things don't seem to relate. Put someone in one of the most difficult situations, and they come out very loving and caring. How did that happen? How did other people start that process with you?
Well, first I was trying to understand what's what actually happened to me. All right, I knew that I was innocent. I knew I wasn't guilty of the things that I was accused of, and going through trial and having friends of mine who went to school with me get on the witness stand and lie. It was hard for me to factor, and having to be convicted, knowing the magnitude that it had, you understand, in the community, and also the impact it had on my life. I was kind of like confused because I was young, and I didn't know anything about the criminal justice system, and I always felt that at the time when it happened, that I was innocent and that I would be found not guilty. And always, I was raised up during the time of Perry Mason, and when a lawyer defend his client, that the lawyer get his client off for, falsely charged, crimes. And that's where my mindset was at. Little did I know that that wasn't a cake that was baked for me. It was something totally different. And when I tried to explain, it was like, what happened, what I knew, it was like rejected. He'll say this, he'll say that. So several different occasions I was admonished by the judge. Understand? So I felt that they didn't want to hear my side of the story. So I was kind of, really, really, baffled by the whole situation. But when after being convicted and then going to prison, you've been told so much about Angola, how bad the prison is. Of course, as a young person, you don't want to go to a place, to an institution like that. So I had this mindset that everybody in prison was evil. There was bad people. And little did I know, by going there, despite the appearance of these guys was caring. These guys was loving. And these guys didn't perceive me as a threat at all because I was this little kid in adult prison.
You were literally a child.
Yes, and many felt that, wait a minute, the system got to the point now they're sending our children to prison. So it was a thing where we're talking about men who was old enough not only to be my father, but also be my grandfather and older brothers. So these guys, what they did in turn was that they collaboratively got together to assure my safety in prison. And they are the ones who helped educated me, helped me to understand my predicament, and told me that I was in dire need of help, not prayer, but also help. And they're the ones that encouraged me to write about my story and help me structure the letter that I needed to appeal to society, different organizations, and also publications. And that's how, when I did that, that's how my case became, you could say, exposed behind what happened. So these guys was instrumental in helping it, help me expose it in my case, not only on a local, but also on a state and national level, and to the point where it's hit the international level as well.
You paid that forward, it seemed, in a lot of different ways within the community in Angola. One of those ways brought you to quilting.
Yes.
I understand you started quilting as to support a fundraiser for the hospice program.
Yes.
I mean, let's just take a minute to address the hospice program. Nothing like that existed in the American prison system before the program that you helped start, right? And this was to help people in their final stages of life at the height of the AIDS crisis, when that kind of support was not happening. And you had to fundraise to support that program yourself in a state prison.
Yes.
Which is just kind of, we'll leave that there.
Right.
How did you learn to quilt? What was the conversation of, okay, we need to raise money, let's quilt for it?
Well, the program basically was, as you stated, was established to support the terminally ill men that was dying in prison. And of course, we got different donations, but we felt that it wasn't enough to sustain the program. So we was kicking ideas about what it is that we can do to raise funds for the program. So guys came up with all kind of things, and And the initial hospice volunteers who graduated, and during, you could say during our graduation, it was suggested that we do a collage quilt with with 2 or 3 volunteers together, and they piece, that they put a little piece together, and they're gonna sew it up. So, in the process of, trying to come up with ideas about raising funds for the program, the guy brought about why not make quilts to sell to the public. And of course, I was there. I said, that's a good idea because quilts are something that, it's lasts for years, generation. And, but it wasn't my intention to be a part of the process. That happened later when the guys who initiated of making quilts, they got into a bind and they needed help. So they asked me the first time. I kind of rejected it because I felt that it was a feminine thing to do in prison. But they kept on, bothering me about it until I said, okay, I'm gonna help you this time. But it's amazing when you get into something, it tends to trigger memories. And when the guys went to showing me, then I started thinking about my grandmother when I was this little kid. I remember seeing my grandmother sewing blankets, in which case they were quilts. And I saw what she was making. I remember what she was making out of rags and tattered material. And then I see, this basket where she had like moss and newspaper, like for batting.
Oh, cool.
And, it's just, so I started recounting this, and I said, wait a minute. I said, I come from a family, a generation, where my grandmother made quilts. So I kind of started having different perspective about, it's, we're doing something noble. We're doing something that support dying men in prison. So in the process, I became comfortable with it. I no longer looked at it as a feminine thing because in prison they do hobbycraft. And in hobbycraft they make female purses and wallets and stuff like that. To me, that's equated to no different than making a quilt. So by me being a graduate from graphic art, they teach you in a process about applicate. So I said, what if I try to apply that within quilting? Will it work? Sure enough, it worked. So, and that's what I started doing, imagery. And it got to the point where I started doing the signature quilt for the rodeo, Angola Rodeo. And it was like the bull, convict, and stuff like that, and guts and glory. And they wrapped it off. And to have a place where you got thousands of people, tens of thousands of people attend the rodeo, they wouldn't mind paying $1 for a ticket. And it got to the point where it became you could say, a money maker for hospice.
Wow. So
every quilt that I made, people wanted it. So they paid, they paid $10, $15, $20, $100 for tickets, stuff like that.
Wow.
Yes.
That's an interesting arc there. And I think let's take a minute. The rodeo at Angola that doesn't exist. That's not functioning currently. It stopped a few years ago.
Well, they stopped it during COVID.
But did it resume again?
Yes, it
Oh
have.
my goodness! Would you please explain what the rodeo is for folks that aren't familiar?
Well, the rodeo came in establishment back in 1960 during Charlie Frazier. He used to be a rodeo champion out of Texas. And when he went to Louisiana, he got in trouble and got time. He convinced the warden back then in the 60s about having a rodeo for the public, convicts, and the warden agreed. And they started having a rodeo, Angola Rodeo, where prisoners, they ride horses, bulls, and all kind of other stuff.
What are your thoughts on that?
It's, first of all, you're talking about men who isolated, don't have no way of making money, funds for themselves, and And some people want to be noted. If it's the point that if they have to go out there and get 15 seconds of fame just by putting their lives and limb on the line, they wouldn't mind doing it. More so that here you have like the contest, Guts and Glory. They have a token, a gold token, in the middle of the bull's head. And we're talking about a bull that weigh over a ton. And here they are electrifying him with a cattle prod. And you can hear this bull crying out. And when they open that chute, this bull coming out raving mad. And they're going to attack whatever is in front of them. And you got about 12 guys standing out there surrounding the bull trying to get that bare token off his head. And many of them pay a price for that. You understand? And if in that token itself worth $500. Now, if nobody get that token, then it goes up to $1,000. So to me, you would look at it as degrading. You look at it, like a gladiator sports. But I understand that some people do whatever it takes to support themselves. Some don't have the means of having a hobby craft or making a hobby craft to sell to the public and things like that. So, of course, I wouldn't do it because I feel it's kind of like degrading. I wouldn't want to, shame myself in the public by doing something like that. And here you got the public, they cheer the animals on and not the people themselves who participate in the program.
You document some of that in your work as well.
Yes.
You document that, and it's so hard to resist talking about your work in the theater program. I could talk with you about that for a very long time.
Yeah.
But you document, there's a piece, what's the name of the piece in the gallery right now, where it's the quilt featuring people at a table in the middle of the arena?
Oh, yes.
Can you tell us about that piece?
Well, that piece they called convict poker,
That's right.
where you have 3 to 4 convicts sitting at a table that is painted red. And they always say that bull didn't like red. And these guys sitting at a table with deck of cards, or they just sitting there. And when they open that chute for the bull coming out, and it charges that table. You understand? And the last man that's sitting there at that table, he wins the award, $500. And there are times where there was, most times, complete wipeout, where you got men flying everywhere because the bull just charging, and it's raving mad, and and these guys, they put their lives on the line. To me, it's insanity to even put their limbs and life on the line for something like that.
Why capture that in a quilt?
Because I feel that the public need to notice. They need to see what's going on. Not as a means of exposure, but these very people that have been sent to prison for life and or a long time, and what they will go through to try to sustain some type of living while they're in prison. And to me, it's like during the time of Caesar, when they had in the Colosseum, they had different sports.
Like the gladiator fights?
Like the gladiators. And that's the way I look at it, where these men put their lives on the line for things like that.
Why choose the medium of quilting as opposed to, you've written a book about your experiences, you've been the subject of a documentary, you've an accomplished theater artist. Why the medium of quilting to deliver the message?
I wanted to do something different from what I was doing in prison, all right? And I knew that people have read so much about me, but people didn't know the life that I lived. They didn't know what I saw. They didn't know what I envisioned. And I wanted the people to see things through my eyes. And I felt that doing something tangible through my artwork, through quilting, that would give them an understanding of my life experience in prison.
To see through your eyes a little bit more?
Yes.
Maybe that's why your quilting is so unusually dynamic in its depth. It's you look at a quilt and you're like, okay, well those are different layers, but the layers that you create feel like 3 dimensions
Yes.
in a powerful way.
Right. And there's one piece that I did. I called it Unforgiving. The story of this guy is that, you look at it, it looks dark and menacing, but really there's a profound story to this piece. And we're talking about a person who unfortunately had to take another man's life because that man murdered his mother. And this guy turned himself in for that very act, and he was given manslaughter. And when this guy went up for parole, he turned it down
Wow.
because he felt that he hadn't been punished enough for taking this person's life, despite this individual murdering his mother. And I felt that was something very profound, that an individual was forced to do something because of the loss of a loved one, his mother. And also that when this guy came to prison, he was like a loner. Many people didn't want to have anything to do with him because they felt that he was kind of off. He had a mental problem. But when this guy joined the drama club, God, this guy he was highly intelligent, very engaging. And what's so profound about it was that he had this voice like James Earl Jones. And I said, you are the right character for the devil in the life of Jesus Christ play.
And is it in that costume that
Yes.
he's portrayed in his portrait?
Yes, portrayed in that portrait.
Your case was the subject of national and international protest and outcry, but it still took almost 42 years for you to be released at the age of 57 in 2016. Can you share why you chose to come to Los Angeles after that?
Well, knowing me, I felt if I would have stayed in Louisiana, I probably wouldn't be at the level I am now, because I left a lot of people behind that I consider family. After 40 years, people become family. And I knew that I would have stayed. I would have been running myself raggedy behind these guys, doing what I can to help these guys. But how can I effectively help them when I went to prison very young? I depended on the support of my mother and father. I never knew how it felt to rent a place, to work a job, an effective job, getting paid, and stuff like that. And I needed a chance. I needed to get, you could say, grounded. And I decided that in order for me to help anyone, I first need to help myself. I need to become fundamentally grounded. So I decided that to leave Louisiana, and in which case that was something that I concluded before I left prison, because I've been out here, and I felt that my chance would be better in another state than would be in Louisiana, and also where the tension and everything else would die surrounding my release. So I felt that it would be a smart move on my part. In which case, I'm glad I made a decision that way.
Has the city, the area, or I guess I could say the county because you're in Pasadena,
Yes.
has it come to represent anything to you at this phase of your life compared to when you were here as a teenager?
Well, home. Meeting the people, they welcomed me with open arms. And every time there's a gathering, I'm invited in and every time. And how community reacted is that during the fire, how they made it their business, to check on each other, to make sure that one another was all right. And it reminded me a lot of the guys that I left behind. They were concerned about each other, family, and that's the most important thing. And that's something that really you could say affects me in a way positive, meaning.
How did you find community here? Did you already know folks? Did you have family here?
Well, I did this play called The Life of Jesus Christ in Angola. And there were people that supported my case since the 70s. They were on vacation. So they found out that that was a production that I was doing in Angola, and it was open to the public.
Wow.
And they decided they wanted to go to it because it was an event for the public. And for the first time, I met some of my supporters that first started off from Chicago, but now live out here in L.A. And they introduced themselves and everything, and they told me that if you ever get out of prison, you have a place to stay. And 3 years later, I was released, and they welcomed me into their home. They helped me get on my feet.
They followed through on their word.
Yes, they followed through on my word. I mean, they and it was a community thing because they got together with those in the community, and Liberty Hill, an organization that they were involved in, where they created a charity for me. Mm. Yes, to help me transition back into society.
Do you remember your first day back in LA?
Yes. Even though I arrived, I came. My greatest wish was that if I ever get out of prison, I wanted to go to the beach. I wanted to feel how the Pacific water felt again. And back then it was cold. When I got out, a friend of mine, Bob Zog, who was actively involved in my case and who came to visit me back in 1989 and interviewed me for a job because I was going up on a pardon board, and the pardon board granted me a pardon, but unfortunately the governor denied me. And I expressed my wish to him that if I ever get out, I want to go to the beach and walk out there in the water. And sure enough, when I got out of here, a few days later, I went to the beach. And just like many years back in 1971, when I went out there, it was the same way the Pacific water was cold. But I enjoyed it because that's something that I dreamed that I wanted to do.
Thank you for sharing that. Let me just see here. Okay, we've talked a little bit about some of the works that are now at the gallery official welcome in Los Angeles. Anything that you are hoping people will specifically take away from looking at the works on display there right now?
That despite people's downfalls, they always say that if you fall, get up. Don't let your downfall be the end of you. Do whatever you can to survive and to get up, knowing that you're not out for the count. And I witnessed many men die in prison. Men got old and have died. And one of the reasons why I became a hospice volunteer is because at one time, when a person you knew got ill, they moved him to the hospital. You would never see that person again unless you get a pass, and that pass was like getting an act of Congress to go visit a person. So when the idea of establishing a hospice program came about, I volunteered. I wanted to be a part of that. And, of course, that process wasn't easy either. To have friends that you knew dying, dying the place. And some of those very guys who helped me to survive in prison, gave me the best of themselves, chose me as their volunteer, and to tell me on their dying bed how proud they were of me. And I want people to know that there are good people in prison, despite what they're in prison for. I wasn't there to judge anyone because I was judged wrongly. I was in a place that I shouldn't have been. Many of them will tell you there's a reason why they're there. Don't do the things I do. Do as I say, not as I do. Because what they done, they said that they were built like that, and this is something that they, you understand, that they asked for. And that I shouldn't be in prison. I shouldn't be there. And to always remember that, because this is not a place for me. And never once did I succumb to that. Never once did I try to, you understand, be like those in prison, because that was something that I didn't want to be. I wanted to maintain my own individuality, knowing that I was an innocent person. And I want people to know, despite what it is, even if you're guilty, there's a chance for change. And never miss out on that opportunity, no matter what.
Gary Tyler, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thanks for
Thank
making the
you.
time.
Thank you, Julia.